All right. So I already asked you how you're doing. I started realizing I have a version of how you got into Christianity and Christian art, and I think it might be wrong. And I don't know how I pieced it together, so I think I'll start there. Is it that you did too many mushrooms and like you started off from a like evangelical background, but nominal, you did too many mushrooms, and then you're like, oh, I think this might be real. Like you felt like you had a legitimate experience with God, and then stopped doing mushrooms, got into Jung and art school. Is that the right order, or is it a different order?
Just about, yeah, that's just about it. I got into Jung before the mushrooms, but in art school.
Oh.
That whole thing kind of happened mid art school, I guess.
Okay.
But basically, yeah.
Okay. Well,
It's fun to hear it described like that, but that is what happened.
I think that's one of the interesting things is to hear someone else try to summarize, because it's like, well, okay, you said this much here and that much there. Part of what I find interesting about that is you're not the only person I know where that has happened, where like, yeah, psychedelics made them go, oh, I think this might be something real, and then they stop doing psychedelics. But yeah, I don't have a lot of wisdom on that topic. But
I don't think it's as uncommon as you would imagine.
right.
I've talked to quite a few people who said that as well. And what do they say? Like, when you get the message, hang up the phone, so you don't have to, doing mushrooms all the time. If you kind of if you get something, you can call it and move on.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, even how I mean, we might be the least healthy culture as far as how that kind of use occurs.
Probably.
Yeah. Anyway, that's not the conversation I want to have.
Sure.
I want to talk about Jonah. Um,
That's a whole
uh,
other topic.
yeah, exactly. We can talk about multiple things, and I want to talk about Jonah.
Okay.
Where did I wrote down a couple of things, and now I don't know where I put it. So I think the first thing that I want to ask you about is, have you heard the theory that it might be a comedy? You ever heard of that?
No, but I mean, it makes sense because of the ending, I think.
Yes.
It's kind of
Yes.
funny.
Also cows. Roll credits. What? Also cows? That's like, you have such an epic story, and the last words are also cows. Um, we so I've heard this theory. It like kicks around, and I'm doing a Bible study with a bunch of people who are not Christians. They during COVID time basically sold the Peterson Genesis series to them. That's basically it. And they became very interested, and we've been meeting ever since. But after we got through Genesis, we've been going through books of the Bible, and we did Jonah. And when we got to the ending, the people burst out laughing. They were like, "What?" But also, they burst out laughing when the giant fish swallows Jonah. And because it comes out of nowhere. It's not like on a literary level, it's not introduced, slowly worked up to, and then the fish swallows them. It's you're not thinking about a fish, right? And then it just pops out of nowhere and just swallows him whole, it seems. So sorry. Have you it sounds like you're not against the possibility that it's a comedy. Can you throw in any thoughts on that aspect?
I guess I think that part is funny towards the end. I can't remember. It's been a little bit. I've focused a lot on the part where he does get swallowed by the fish and the prayer in particular, but
Right.
so I don't think about the ending that much, but all I can picture is him shaking his fist, at the end, and that is hilarious. It's such a anticlimactic. It is. It's very funny. I'm not against that at all. I kind of like that actually.
Okay. Yeah. Or we so we're reading it. My wife is an actor, and as am I, in community theater, not professionally. And we get to that part, and she does it seriously and just goes, "Yes, I do well to be angry, angry enough to die." And I'm just like, "Oh, little buddy." Like, it's just the the clear attempt to make him ridiculous in how he's kind of spilling himself out. Yeah. Um, so the other thing that I was wondering about your perspective on is I think you've made an incredible piece on Jonah, two incredible pieces on Jonah. But the first one that have you made other pieces on Jonah, or are these two
Oh,
the mains?
just these two, yeah, so far.
Okay. In looking at other versions of the story artistically, can't find a version in the last 200 years that doesn't make it look like he's getting swallowed by a blue whale or it's like an animal that one could see.
Mm-hmm.
I should say it that way. Have you noticed this, and what are your thoughts on that? Like an unwillingness to engage in it as I don't like the word fantastical because everyone else who uses it, even the people who well, Genesis is myth, I always get the dismissive tone from people. And what I really like about your piece is it is not winking at all. And it feels like one of the things I'm trying to do is try to be a person outside of time where I could have a conversation with someone 500 years ago and they'd be like, yeah. This guy seems to understand things, right? And I feel like your piece is part of that conversation where it doesn't belong in the Jonah paintings that exist in the past 500 years or 200 years, but that it's from 900. It's from, right? Okay, I've said a bunch of weird things. Your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think I know what you mean because I grew up looking at, I think, what you would call, maybe they're fantastical, I don't know, like a children's book version of Jonah is really what always seems to be depicted to me, and it does look like a whale, and it just, when you read the story, it says whale, but it doesn't sound like a whale at all if you're reading the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it sounds terrifying, and I don't. I tried to look into the a little bit of the origin of the words. I know you know a lot more about that than I do, but I remember looking at like whale. Why would it say whale? And when you look at it a little bit closer, I think I saw it said something like whale dragon or like fish dragon or something
Right.
like that. The description is not at all like being in a fish. He doesn't sound like he's in a fish whatsoever, but it sounds much more. I guess what I was trying to capture was more like the experiential side of it rather than the literal, he was swallowed by a big fish. It's like, well, what does that mean beyond their. I don't know. It seemed like everything I've seen before was so literal, and that just didn't capture it doesn't capture the feeling.
Right.
If you were going through that experience, it wouldn't. I don't know, like if you were scuba diving and you saw a blue whale, you probably wouldn't be terrified, right?
Well, it is interesting because I feel like when I've seen images of people scuba diving and there being a whale, it is no longer a whale. Like I have seen images of that and it makes me deeply uncomfortable. And it fills me with awe and it hits me. Like there's random videos of people in glass bottom kayaks or scuba diving and they encounter some kind of a whale and it doesn't feel right. And it's like but in a picture of a whale, it never captures it because I don't know, it feels all of a sudden like it's a scientific breakdown that there's no emotional what that communicates. And like from a boat, seeing a whale is like experiencing a giant sea serpent. Like it looks more like a giant snake from a boat than it does what even we think of as a whale, which is part of why I don't like the images of it as a whale, because it's always from the perspective of someone who's seen a giant whale in a museum or seen like I can't remember how many times I've seen it, but I've seen more than once like a blue whale's skeleton. Um, and like with a picture next to it being like, oh yes, that's exactly what that looks like. Oh, it makes perfect sense, right? Like whereas your image is getting into the like, oh, I showed the image to a friend and he had the identical response as I did, which was like it actually conveyed awe. It made him go, oh, like wow. In kind of like a horror, like a little bit of horror, like awe, the actual term awe. Yeah.
Like I guess that's what I was going for. I mean, not really sure. To me, the whole thing was experiential,
Right, right. Well,
and
and that's
feeling
something I
something.
wondered.
So,
Is
yeah.
is it intentionally pushing against things, or is this just you trying to engage as honestly as possible? Like, to what extent is it I'll show them, like
Oh
pushing
no,
against it? Not at all.
doing that at all. No, it just
Right.
to me that was the most true expression of of the story of reading it and identifying with the
Mhm.
narrative and the feeling and trying to find how that feels and it doesn't it just that's what it felt like and you know the figure is very small and the little boat on top is very small and the monster the you know whale is
Mhm.
huge. It's not just one thing, it's kind of everywhere and that's how it
Mhm.
seemed to me. So it was I guess maybe not so much literal as um more inner experience, right? Which I think is maybe why those other images where you just see like a nice whale, you know, and
Right, right, right. Looks like
it
you should
doesn't
be able
really
to pet it.
match.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't match. It's that it's not the story. So to me, that was just how it was coming across to me. I wasn't purposefully trying to I don't know change something up. That was just the way it came across.
Yeah. Well, and I think the legitimacy of that does come across because I feel in a lot of modern art, the commenting, that a lot of what it is commenting on another piece or commenting on an idea or something like that, that it's trying to be clever. And in its attempt to be clever is not being clever. It has, I don't, the maturity of the piece to me is partially in it not making comments, it just being what it is. Um, so I think I'll show you my version. Here, let me grab it. Um, so this is my version of it. Okay, let me show you.
Wow.
So mine is
I
it's
wish I
a
could see it in real life.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see, this is a carving. So
Yeah.
each, actually, 1 second. So I'm using a material called foam core where I made the image, I like drew it first and then put it on these sheets that are like styrofoam. And then each one, so this is the back layer has the waves that have these things on it. And then this goes over, that goes over top like that. So
Yeah.
that each layer gives a different sense for stuff. So all of those waves are
Wow.
different. Yeah. And then there's a couple of adjustments that I kind of want to talk about the adjustments to the image that I made as well. But
Yeah.
like decisions had to be made about how, like you said, your image is not interested in logic. So it's like, where is this in comparison to this? I don't, right? And I had to, it was very, the medium is the message.
Right. That is so cool. The layer. That's incredible.
Yeah, where yeah, if you see it on the side, how deep it is. So I got here. I have some of the stuff. So I had this foam core for a play I was directing. I made a breakdown of my set. Here's my set, and then on it would be all the like pieces. That's an example of a piece of furniture that was on there. So I built a model of my set, and I had all this leftover foam core, and kind of went, what do I want to do with this? And I was looking at your drawing, and thought to myself, particularly with the waves, I thought that the depth of it, the feeling of the depth, could really be well conveyed with it. And so I went about making it. And then the frame is actually a part of the piece,
Hmm.
because when I made it and was just looking at it, it just didn't have the same feeling as this has, having the feeling of the depth. There's my Jonah. Which again, decisions had to be made, because yours, it like defies like what is the water, because it kind of looks like it almost like cones out where he is, whereas I made the decision to have him falling, make it look almost like a flame and almost like a womb.
Hmm.
Yeah, you can see. Yeah, so these are different layers, and it can also be smushed. So if you get really in there, some of that stuff is actually just pressed down. Um, and
Mm.
then it's painted with like dollar store acrylic paint.
Really?
Yeah, I just used it a lot. Well, because my background is, my dad is an amazing artist, but so I have some of the thinking of an artist, but I never had any training. He didn't have the patience to teach me, so I never did anything with it. But for Halloween, I made Halloween costumes, and so carving physical art makes way more sense than drawing it.
Hmm.
And so the drawing, I think, is like fine, but this is something that I think I can actually like do and feel proud of. Um, yeah, and I'll
That's
tell you
great.
one of the things I figured out, by the way, and I don't know if you did this intentionally, and I'm wondering, is the silhouette of the whale is a shark. It's I don't know if this is intentional. If you just took, I think I actually have it. If you just traced your image of the great fish, it looks like the outline of a shark with like a weird mustache. Is that what
It's
is that?
quite possible that I looked at an image of a shark or something to get the. It almost looked wolfish to me too,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
a snout kind of thing.
yeah,
Um, so I don't know that I can't remember now if I did that on purpose or not. I might have though, because I still wanted it to be a little bit fish-like, but not
yeah, yeah.
too
Well,
much.
there is a first century, second century image of Jonah that was found. I think it's in Christian catacombs, and sure enough, the fish looks like it has a wolf mouth and like 7 different tentacles going off in different like it doesn't even make sense how the thing I would say is that if you're just reading the Hebrew, he doesn't describe it as being swallowed by an animal. He describes it as being swallowed by death itself.
Yeah.
Out of the belly of Sheol, out of death itself, I cried, right? Like it's not he's not in there with Pinocchio, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
it's something else entirely. Yeah, and I could also get the serpentine image out of what you did, where like the coiling and the it has more in common with a snake than it does with some kind of a whale.
Right. Yeah, and I think too the ideas of death and chaos and hell a little bit, maybe, I'm just trying to mix those ideas together into something that is more of a feeling than a literal representation was kind of where I was going with it. Just because he does describe in the prayer, there's all this description of being maybe like the roots of mountains. I think I was reading King James version or something like that, but it just doesn't sound like there's nothing about fish, right? Really, it's about very underworld, death, despair. It's a feeling. So
well, and I think I've tried to figure this out for myself. So I'm a big fan of the Old Testament, obviously. If you're reading the sections on birds in what you're allowed to eat, you're not allowed to eat bats. A bat is considered a bird, right? And we go, oh, how foolish, they don't understand. And it's just like, bats fly. Bird just refers to things that fly.
Yeah.
That's what birds are, right? Like, just come on, be mature about this. Birds fly, fish are in the water.
Yeah.
which is still true, because a shellfish and a cuttlefish and a starfish and like a fish, they don't have relationship to each other if you're doing the zoological like species breakdown. Fish just means it's in the water, right? Like that's all it means. And I think that if you're thinking in those terms, snake and worm are related animals, clearly.
Yeah.
And so, and you could do, I think it was Milton, he made a comparison between them, where the devil is sometimes described as the worm, right? Like he is the one who eats the dust and brings about our death, right? Like, so he eats us when we're dead, right? So that image of the serpent causing death and then being the one whose entire appetite is our decomposition, right? Like it's an amazing metaphor, but you only get there if you mix those things. And I think sharks are in the same category as worms. Shark, worm, and snakes. Again, if you're from a boat looking at them, what do you see?
Right.
Yeah, you see this thing, right? It's deeply, they both have scales, or I guess sharks don't. But fish have scales. Anyway, yeah, you would see these things as connected in a way we're no longer capable of connecting in our minds.
Right. Yeah, that's true. There's all this categorization that gets in the way now that is kind of useless in terms of the experience of the thing. Right? So, like the worm and the snake, if you're thinking in a scientific sort of way, of course, don't really go together, but of course they go together, right?
Right. Like we know. It's immediately conveyed.
But you've kind of got to like detach yourself from that way of thinking to get there, which can be difficult, I guess. It's a lot more feeling experiential based instead of intellectual, like, categorization of things, categorization of experience versus just having the experience, I think.
Well, and I wondered if this is intentional. Again, because I've seen things where artists will paint someone else's painting and then give insight based on that. And this is the only time I've done that. So, but I felt, again, the shark thing was one, but the other aspect that I saw was the way that I don't know, tentacles, let's call them tentacles, it conveyed to me like fire coming up, like again, like he's going into hell.
Yeah.
Like it's and I wondered if that was intentional. The things themselves look like flames flickering up here and there, and
Yeah, that was intentional. I just it seemed to me that those mixing of categories
yeah,
made sense, like serpent and fire, hellfire. That just it seemed to just go together. There's like the layering of images
mm-hmm.
to something more than that. I think it was kind of the direction I was going with that. Because the monster, the whole bottom half is really this mixture of all these different things that kind of come up in the story, and then the implication, like a web of association of things that go with that.
Right.
Shark or like a wolf, maybe like just a little bit of a wolf, but still.
Right. No, I see it. I absolutely see it.
Yeah, to give you like a more, I was trying to layer the experience like with, not just one literal thing, but so yeah, the flame, it's definitely intentional. At least I was trying to convey something of that without it being like, this is hell, like a very
Right.
cartoonish version of, devil with a pitchfork kind of thing.
No, to me, it's the longer you look at it, the more it has an interpretation in it. Like, and I don't mean that in like a modern art wink wink nod nudge nudge, yes, you get it, but instead like a poem allowing you to experience what may have become flat, like a poem that in the way it rhymes something brings two ideas together, and now in your mind you can link them, whereas before you couldn't. So I mean, even the way in your image it's like curled against the waves themselves, this real idea of like it being an embodiment of the water itself. That it gives a sense of the idea that just below the surface of the water is pure chaos. Like it really conveys that. I also think it was an interesting experience for me in painting it, because I also made a couple of decisions, changes that I realized Pajot kind of talks about, that like an icon, over and over again, people are drawing the same image. And so they're making changes, and we can kind of see different comments that people are making. So for me, here, let me show you some of the differences. So the top, this is a piece of paper that's like two pieces of paper that are glued on. So it gives the moon, but it's barely risen, right? It's barely anything. But this, to me, it's the exact same color of black as the night sky. This is my version of the Orthodox concept of the holy dark. Do you know what that is?
Not really. Would you tell me?
Yeah, so God, like Christ is light and all this other stuff that we've all heard, but God exists before light exists, right? He says, let there be light, so that means he exists before light. And so in some of the conversations, the deepest experience we have with God is not using, like light is a metaphor, a tree is a metaphor, a father is a metaphor, like a mother, like a husband, a warrior. These are all metaphors. So what is it like to experience God beyond the metaphor? And the Orthodox response is the holy dark, where you come back from an experience and it's not a vision because you didn't see anything. A vision is just a series of metaphors. To have the deepest experience with God, you come back with nothing. It's like, because it's so big. It's like the vastness of space. Like you can't picture infinity. You basically see infinity every day you look at the night sky, but it's in the darkness. That's what goes on forever. The light is the finite little points that make you go, oh, but the real infinity is not the stars. The real infinity is the black around them. This is my best. This is the best I can do for.
No, that's great. That's a great image.
Yeah.
And it's so fitting. It fits so well with the whole that image in the story. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So and again, so I think you did this great job of showing him falling, like the image of him falling. And so what I did also is, and I found this in some imagery, a boat would be used as an image of the cross, specifically the sail. So it's to me, it's also an image of the cross, right? So there's the cross, there's the Father that's living in the infinite dark, and the person falling into death itself. And so it's kind of a passion, like it's the passion of Jonah, I guess. I don't know how else to describe it. Where, yeah, it was just like a little thing where I loved the image of your boat. I have issues with my own. But yeah, brought in the some kind of a Jesus aspect of it.
I like that. It's funny you say you have issues. I had a terrible time drawing the boat. I don't know why. It was so difficult to get the right. I don't know why, but I had the same problem. Speaking of the cross imagery there, I'm using that again in this second Jonah drawing. I didn't really have it intentionally in that one, but I did wanted to bring it into this next one. Not that you can.
Oh yeah, bring it forward. Bring it forward. Yeah.
If it'll show up or not much, but
yeah. But I'd like to guess, is it that because I've seen the image, it kind of looks like Jesus praying in Gethsemane.
Yeah, so there's what is it? The sign of Jonah is referenced. I can't remember. Is it Matthew? I forget. I'm terrible with
No, it's all right.
But let's see. There's the hook, but then it's also the cross, and there's this image. Oh, I can't remember what book it's in now, but there's this 12th century image of God the Father fishing for the Leviathan.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Christ on the hook as the cross, but then there's the line is the patriarchs. Right. And that blew my mind. That's incredible. So like catching death with this, this hook cross. So yeah, I love that you added that in there too, because these images just layer on top of each other so well. You can't, it just works. So.
Oh, that's great. No, I think that's so. Sorry, can you pick up the image again too? Because to me, the snake and the serpent, the tongue is a snake in and of itself, right? Like the tongue looks snake-like, so it's like the whole thing is in him, and it also, again, I don't know if intentional, has a bit of it looks like a tree. It looks like with the tongue and it's almost like a tree that he's in.
Yeah, I didn't think of it that way, but I can pick up on that too. There, actually, my husband did say that. He said it looks like a trunk of a tree, and he's sitting.
Yeah.
But again, with this serpentine thing, the sort of overlaying of trying to pull several things together at once, and yeah, using. I mean, it's Jonah, but I feel there's a lot of the story of Christ in there too. I mean, what would you say? It's a precursor or a hype? I'm not sure which word to use, but
yeah. Well, and as I look through it is there's a sign of Jonah a couple of ways. Like it's difficult as a Christian to read it and not see him asleep at the bottom of the boat. How he says, we'll solve this problem if you kill me. Right? Like there's a couple of things that are without a doubt precursors or pointing. It is interested in pointing at something. Yeah, yeah. The the image of Leviathan also connected here. I don't know if you've come across this, but it's becoming more and more popular. Um, Other cultures have Leviathan, and Leviathan has 7 heads and is also described as a water creature, but also as a twisting serpent. And Leviathan is described as a twisting serpent in Isaiah. And in one of the Psalms, it says, describing God, it says, you crushed the heads of Leviathan. So again, this like fantastical image of a multi-headed chaos dragon, that's not, what is it? The NLT, New Living Translation, says it's a crocodile. Just like, this is some crocodile if it's got 7 heads.
Yeah.
Like,
I haven't. I remember I hadn't done it too recently because I kind of came to this conclusion. I think the first drawing I did, which is a few years ago now. But this overlapping of so many images with Leviathan, I'm like, what is it? I don't know what it is. What is it trying to say? But you end up kind of getting this amalgamation of images that adds up to more of an experiential representation that something like it's one thing, it's just a dragon or it's just this, it's just that. It's
But if you experience it that way, then you can connect it to the dragon that's in Revelation.
Yeah, sure.
So it is a 7-headed chaos dragon and all this stuff, and it carries all of its imagery to it. And then you get to the New Testament, and all of a sudden people are like, no, that's not to be taken literally. And it's just like, but they won't. So because Leviathan is taken just to be a dinosaur, I can't remember what kind. But there's like a dinosaur that people are like, this is what it is. Then they can't see it as connected to that, as this monster. And I like, yours is a monster. It's not you can't you can't fish this thing up. It is a real monster. Yeah.
I hadn't actually connected it to the thing in Revelation, but because I think maybe just because the way I'm, more visual than
Yeah.
not, the imagery has to come first, right? Like it's I don't know, it's probably like a unorthodox way of thinking, but it's like image first, words second. Because
Right. No.
categorizations of direct experience, which you pin down, and when you try to just chop everything into these little bits and say no, I mean, I don't know.
Well, so you're
that way.
You're saying that, but okay, so when I first become a Christian, I read Revelation pretty quickly, and as everyone does, and I go, I have no idea what this is. Yeah. A year or two go by, I read it again. I have no idea what it is. And I think it was the 3rd time I read Revelation. I actually decided to read it without trying to understand it. To read it as, I think I had come across this theory. At the end of Revelation, it says, blessed is the one who reads this book, and blessed is the one who hears it, which implies that the majority of people never read this book. You don't read a chapter. You're sitting or standing, and someone is basically performing the book, like reading it to you as poetry, and you're just getting these waves of images over you. And so I listened to it and read it without any attempt to try to figure out, is Obama the leopard king or something like that? Like any of that stupid stuff. I was just like, no, I'm just going to try. And what was weird was that it made perfect sense. I couldn't write down, oh, this is what this means, but it had poetic dream sense to it, where I'm like, oh, I see where everything's moving, how it's going. I could visualize it, and it made a kind of sense. Right. Yeah. On that connection, though, the Leviathan, oftentimes it's the water monster, and then it's with Behemoth, the the land monster. So the water monster, the land monster. And so in the New Testament, in Revelation, you have the multi-headed dragon and you have the beast on the ground. Behemoth is it's just the word for beast.
Okay.
It actually is the word that is cows at the end of Jonah.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, it's also behemoth.
Land critter. Yeah.
Yeah. Beast. Yeah. So I think we're unable, without visualizing the way that you're expressing, I think we're not seeing the connections, because some of the connections are imagistic.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah. And yes, pre-verbal connections that get very confused once you try to categorize too much, I think is what it. It's funny, I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but I was struck by these I think they're called, I think there's a Latin word, but they're called like a poor man's Bible back in the day. They would have the Bible stories, but it was mostly images because almost no one could read. And the stories would be laid out next to each other, not in chronological order, but as this story relates to this story imagistically or symbolically or narratively. And so you would understand one story by looking at another story, which I know we kind of do that now, but this was very image-based. And it seems that maybe that the Bible is so confusing to so many people now is because we're so stuck on the words.
Right.
And we used to go into the church and listen, right? You would hear, maybe listen more than you would read. I don't know when people started actually getting, like, books were so expensive for most of history that nobody had them. So nobody was reading. You'd go to the church and see the stained glass windows or look at an image or two, and that was kind of your experience of the story. Where it speaks to you on a lower level, like a gut level, or more of like a level of the soul and not so much of the intellect, where it gets so confused up, is my impression of the, I don't know.
Yeah, and there's Job, at the end of Job, God shows up and says, basically all of this book was heresy, right? Like God basically says that. And so I'm like, why did I spend all of this time reading this if it's all heresy, right? But then, again, people have come up with this theory that it's actually a play, that Job is like a character that people already knew. And so I found a performance where they got 5 actors to be the different characters, and they did them not, slowly analyzing the text, but instead like doing the chapters as monologues, where like an actor is doing a soliloquy and like crying out and becoming emotional, and then the friends responding and debating him. And like that had first off, I was very surprised because you get through it much faster, and it is a much more emotional piece to hear it like that. And so a lot of people are like, yeah, like would people have sat and read this book? No. And so it's like Shakespeare. You're not supposed to read Shakespeare. Like, we all experience Shakespeare in high school having to read it. But it's like, if you read the script of Jaws, you have no idea what that movie is.
Yeah.
You got to watch the movie. It's not
That's just not the form it should be coming through.
Yeah, exactly. I want to show you another piece because I did one and I don't know who else to show this stuff to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I kind of, through making this first piece, realized that I really, really like it. It took a very long time, but it was very, very soothing. So I did my own version of Pajot's Image of Everything.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, so this is, this one's much bigger, but yeah. So we'll start at the bottom. There's Adam in the cave.
Wow.
the skull of Adam going up. And then, yeah.
Oh, cool. Do you think you'll continue to do them? The layering is just so interesting.
Yeah, and I get to make decisions based on that. Yeah, I'm working on this is a massive piece. Maybe I'll show you it in a second. But I got to make decisions that I really, really like. So, okay, do I have something I can use? Okay, here, I got something here. Okay, so Pajot talks about this in his image so there's Jesus and the image of like the halo around him, but the darkness that he's in, Pajot described that as the holy dark. That's one of the first times I came across it. And I got to, because of how I'm using material, made a decision that this goes in.
Oh, cool.
So where Jesus is, because of how the image is layered, is literally the highest and lowest point in the image.
It's cool.
So it's
very neat.
It's deeper than the deepest bit of the sky. Because I dug in deeper than that. So it's literally the top and the bottom of the image.
Mm-hmm.
And then here I actually have. Here's Pajot's version, right? And he actually said he doesn't like his own coloring. So I felt a lot of freedom to change the coloring. And I got to make, again, I really like the solving it like a puzzle. So the color of the water is the same color of the sky. Because to me, it is heaven coming down, which I don't see conveyed in his. I also made the dragon in the background much more serpentine, I guess, like much more clearly a snake. And I made the decision that the red in the snake is the same as the red of the fruit, which is the same as the red of the blood. Also, in his image, I found this bizarre that he made this decision. So here's Pajot's. It's two spurts coming out of the side of Christ, and they're both red. But in John's gospel, it distinctly says water and blood come out. So I did that where the red is so there's two spurts and one is the literal, so it's like heaven itself is pouring out, right? Because these are the, and that there's my halo, right? Like his the crown of thorns. I had to figure out how to make that float up there, because he can on a 2D image make it float and that's fine, but I actually had to connect it to something in order to make it go up like that. But yeah, and this is all like textured and
yeah.
But that and like even the thorns here are these little triangles of paper that I cut out to give it like let me see if I can get really in there, to give it like texture going up. When I'm in a museum, I want to like touch the paintings. And so I got to do that through this and be like, no. And telling even my friends, no, you can touch it. It's fine.
The color choices that you made, it's like, it's very, I find myself doing that a lot too, where you start trying to connect. It starts to all like connect with color choices you're making. You get so much deeper into the story because of that. Yeah.
Well, and you have to make decisions, so why not make them with a purpose, right? Why not get into the symbolic? Yeah, and so like this, I also got to use. So I was figuring, like, I'm not basing this on anyone else's way of doing stuff. So I'm figuring some things out. So this layer, like, you can see that all these details are raised. But what I did is, here, I think I can do it with a spare piece. The foam core can be squished. So if I take a piece like this and then squish it, it stays like that forever, right? So what I did is I pasted the image on it and squished the background so that it remained like Adam and Eve here. The Adam and Eve remained forward, and the background is crushed. So it also makes them smooth, but the ground textured because of that poking. Yeah, no. I have really felt inspired. Heck, I might turn your new Jonah image into one.
That would be so cool. I love this layering thing. It's so interesting. It makes me want to, I don't know, try it out in some way, because too meditating on a story, but then like you have an image and then you start pulling the pieces apart and you have to consider them or contemplate on them.
Right.
In a whole new way. That's very intriguing way to get into the story.
Well, I can even show you some of my, like I use like a little scalpel blade. You can buy it at like the dollar store. They usually sell sheets. There's two different kinds. One can be squished and the other one can't. I prefer the one that can be squished because I'm now doing it in this way. I really recommend it because the material is dirt cheap. It's not like, part of my selection of colors also is like I'm buying paints from the dollar store, right? It's like it's this stuff, right? Like
It's too, because you can then have the freedom to experiment without feeling like you're gonna break the bank by messing it up once or something like that, which is nice.
Yeah, as my wife has encouraged me more and more to buy more things, because especially when I was first doing the Jonah stuff, I'm figuring it out as I'm going along, and I don't know if I'm actually going to do it. But then my wife encouraged me to make a much larger piece, so I can. So this is the layout. I was telling you about it before. Where actually here first I'll show you this. So this Pajot said that the rings it's 7 rings. It's supposed to be the days of creation. For his, it's flat, but I really liked this image of like each being a layer down, right?
Yeah.
To give it that sense of depth that you can't get any other way. And because he connected it with creation, I came up with this idea. So this is the sketch, how it started on some graph paper. Of the days of creation. So darkness and light, water and sky, the dry land, and the vegetation popping up. I connect the stars with also the creation of the heavenly creatures, because sometimes the angels are described as stars. Like they are the host of heaven, right? Like
Can I see the image again? It's so cool.
Yeah, so there's the weird angels, your wheels within wheels covered in eyes. And then but with the sun and the moon at the top and the bottom, and then birds and fish, and with Leviathan, there's my Leviathan at the bottom. Then animals with human at the top, and then the finished image. And here, actually, let me see if I can unplug. That's what this is.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah, it's each one is going to be 7 inches. So it is in and of itself the 7 times 7. So
awesome. I love how big it is, so you can actually get into the details and like get a real sense of. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, that's where. And there's my Leviathan.
That's cool.
Which has 7 points to it, even whether or not you can see it. And even like the right hand being the fish-like fish, and the left being the weird.
The weird stuff.
The weird stuff. And here you can see very similar to medieval bestiaries. That's where I took a lot of the images. You have human being at the top, Eve coming out, right? Like I did this thing of top and bottom, where Eve is at the top, and then these animals that are all compared to Satan are at the bottom. So the crocodile, you can see a snake coming out of the water, the snakes and frogs and the scorpion, right? Like the desert creature. And then at the top is actually all the animals that it's purposely a cherubim. So cherubim is human, lion, bull, and an eagle. So that's why you have human, lion, the eagle above it. Yeah, and then lion and the lamb, the goat next to the leopard, the lamb next to the wolf, and then you have Eden at the center as well. And you can't fully see it yet. It is going to be like each layer is nested in the layer below it, so that it looks like Eden is basically held in like creating a nest. I don't know how else to describe it.
That is amazing. So what are you gonna do with this? It's huge. Are you gonna hang it in your house, or are you gonna get?
The whole thing is 50 inches across, which again, like, because 50 is like is the year of Jubilee, right? So 7 times 7 plus an inch for the frame. Like, again, because I get to make these stupid decisions. My wife was like, you should create a giant piece that could be in a church. Because when I show these images to people, they say, this is not supposed to be, like, this feels like it's supposed to be liturgical. Like, it's supposed to be in a church. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do with it afterwards. I really like the idea of doing art, not as a profession, but just pursuing the things that I enjoy and sharing them. But I want to share them, and it doesn't feel like sharing if it's just in my house. Kind of creating this image, my wife is like you could sell it to a church or something like that. But I don't know. I don't know how. Well, okay. I don't know how an artist can sell an original. I know how I could sell a copy of this, or if I do a second version of it, but I don't want to part with it.
You're right. It becomes very dear to your heart, and then what do you do?
Yeah. Now, one of the benefits is, so all my stuff, like I have a sketchbook where I'm tracing different images and drawing, and like, so these are the birds that haven't made their way on there yet. Which, yes, bats are included as birds.
I love that.
They are supposed to be, right?
Yep.
But with that, I take this and then I make a photocopy. And I mirror the photocopy as well, and then I arrange it on the piece, and then go, okay, this goes here, that goes there. There's dead space here. How do I fit another one in? But what that means is I actually have identical copies of everything that's on there.
Right.
So I could, it still takes a hell of a lot of time, but I could make a duplicate of that image. But each one would be slightly different. That's actually, I doubt my in-laws are going to be watching this, but one of the images that I just kind of sketched was the Ark of the Covenant. So there's my Ark of the Covenant. But I did it with this material, again, dollar store frames. I'm going to be painting it gold. Like, I needed a base coat, and because the Ark of the Covenant is wood overlaid with gold, that's why it's brown.
Nice.
It's not even going to be conveyed, but
but it's a nice symbolic gesture. It's the process.
Right. But so this one is a perfect example of how I could easily make duplicates of an image. So this is going to be their Christmas gift this year.
That's awesome. That's a great gift.
Yeah. And then again, it's going to be black behind here, because this is, again, like what I was saying with your image of Jonah, the interpretation is in the image. Oh, look at that, the sun coming through. And so I see the Ark of the Covenant as a throne, And I oftentimes don't see that conveyed
Mhm.
in artistic renderings, whereas this to me feels like someone should sit on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I've been working on
Wow.
and have no idea, yeah, what to do with it.
I don't know, but I love that. I don't know if you'd be interested in this at all, but just to mention it, there's the Sherry Harkins has the art group that kind of surrounds Paul Vanderklay's group.
Mhm.
And I don't know if they're doing anything new, but I know that she just put on a little Exodus show.
Okay.
Shouldn't say little. There's actually a lot of artists contributing, I think, but hopefully in the future they'll keep doing it. And it's just like with the stuff that you're doing and like how much research and knowledge you have into everything, like your stuff should also be seen somewhere, like just the images at least. I don't know if they're having physical stuff yet, but I feel like I don't know. That they're all cool, but that big one, I'm so excited to see where that's going.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be massive. I think it's, what is it, like 5 feet? It's 5 feet across.
I think so. I'm bad at math.
Or sorry, 4? Yeah, yeah. It's about 4 feet across.
Yeah.
Well, and it was I really appreciate I contacted you about making a piece that is copying your piece, right? And it's in many ways it is quote unquote derivative, right? But it is like it's a different medium, and so
Yeah.
it does innovate. And I like this idea also of being within artistic communities where um, where that can happen,
Yeah.
where
Playing off of each other's ideas and we're all
right,
yeah, I love that.
yeah,
I think that's really important. At least it seems that way to me. You know, there's kind of I can't remember we probably got somewhere in touch because of Paul Vanderklay's little network of
yeah,
people,
yeah.
I imagine. But you know, I've been um somewhat frustrated. There's a lot of talking that goes on, which I guess
Mhm.
for some people is great, but in the end I'm like, okay, but are we gonna make something? Like not we, but you know, are we like does something get made out of this that's more than just words, right? And
Yeah,
um what you're doing is really that's very exciting in that way because it's like think of that hanging that big one or even the Jonah ones like hanging somewhere and people being able
yeah,
to look at it and think about it and experience it that way is so much cooler. Um,
right,
yeah,
right.
the idea of a group of people being able to like bounce these things around.
Well, and I feel like we're in the period of time has a problem with its frame. And the frame itself is like, what is the purpose of your piece of art? What is the purpose of what you're doing? And what are like, people have these structural criticisms and all this other stuff, but like within the church, like there was a period of time where I was working as a youth pastor, and I've made a decision to be in non-paid ministry, to be like a group. The groups are based on people whose life is financed by them focusing on this, and then they tell you can do this too. It's like, I can't do that. I i have a day job. I have, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
like, how what I'm trying to do, like, I'm part of an artist community, and I specifically acting, I like theater group, acting, writing, directing. I encourage people not to pursue it as a job,
Yeah.
because everyone's trying to figure out, how do I make this a thing that can make money? And I'm trying to figure out, like, and I think that if we actually have this as the goal, it can be easily achieved. Could we have art as part of our lives, as opposed to um, a piece that you can sell and make a couple $1,000s? Um, yeah, like, could we do something that is for you and for your community? Um, and like, I'm not leading a church, but I'm leading a 10-person Bible study, which to me is like, it's no small feat. Like, and the people are deeply engaged. Like, and that I see as something you can do even if you have a day job.
Hmm.
And like, us being engaged and celebrating together and like forming not criticizing communities, but actually making them ourselves. And like you said, actually making pieces of art, actually doing things.
Yeah.
And could we make pieces where their purpose is for sharing and people can experience them?
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote a poetry book that's all based on Ruth way back in the day. So it's every. I actually had to get permission from the English Standard Version of the Bible. So every title is verses from Ruth. And so if you read all the titles of the poems, you read the entire book of Ruth.
Oh.
So it'll, here, do I have it? Let's see. So I made these like little booklet things, and here's an example of one, right? Where it's like, there's the passage, there's the poem,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there was a theater grant that my wife was like, I think you should memorize your book of poetry and perform it, because I'd performed poetry before. So she had the Bible open and read the passages, and then I performed it, and we did it like 8 times. And what's interesting is that if you sell a book of poetry, no one reads it.
Right.
They like it like, oh, it's poetry, fun. But like, much like the book of Job, or like when people think of Job, they think of the first 2-3 chapters and the ending. That's what they think of as. But Job is, it's like 40 chapters. Is that right?
Something like that, I want to say.
Yeah, and so you don't, like, what are you doing studying that? A lot of people avoid it, but if you just experienced it,
Right.
you can experience the whole thing in one sitting. And so that's what we did. The whole thing is like it's a little over an hour of performance that then I got everyone to basically hear all of it and got to layer metaphors and everything else. So how do we create stuff for other people to experience? And honestly, like, your work being available on Instagram, I mean, it's such a small thing, but it is a way in which art has become something that many, many more people can experience. Like, I see that there.
Yeah, I don't know where else to put it, to be honest. I'd love to figure out a way to have, because everything is so detached now, right? It's so disconnected. Right. It's like it's great to do a poetry recital, because yeah, that just makes so much more sense to hear it read than to, right, you pick it up, right, thumb through it a little bit and set it aside, but to hear it is so much in this more dramatic fashion is so much, it's a whole experience, right? Yeah, I don't know what to do about that, but it's something I'm very interested in, at least exploring. I'm in Eastern Europe right now, so getting together with other people is a little bit more difficult, but still, it's an important thing for I don't know, for us to, like, people to get together and experience those kind of things it's really exciting.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because you're also in a place where you could you can communicate in images and not have to worry about anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've become more interested in like creating a series, like purposely creating a large work. So for me, that was Ruth, where it's like, I can't remember. It's 50 pages of poetry, right? Like it's an hour when performed. It's not a small thing. It's like building something bigger. And I couldn't find anyone who did what I did. So I couldn't find anyone who like wrote a poem on just one section of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's one of the things I really liked about the Jonah image is it's somehow it's very similar to an icon, where it's conveying like the whole story or something like that, or like where the images are stacking, and Yeah. Yeah, and it seems like you want the words to be read with the image. Would that be right? Like chapter 2?
I think so. Yeah, particularly the prayer, um, which I don't know why it was just very significant for me. I'm actually in this newer Jonah drawing. I'm going to write out the whole prayer into parts, which I've never done. I've never added words to things before,
Hmm.
like in the image itself. But I like that a lot, and yeah, I think in the Instagram post I included the prayer in there because I felt like it goes together, and because sometimes when you see an image all by itself, it's missing context. It's just, you can scroll right by and keep going, but it's like if I was to say do a gallery show or something like that, I would definitely hang like the prayer next to it or
Hmm.
something like that because it's all woven together, and um, it doesn't just stand by itself, I guess.
Well, and I really, again, this idea of creating collaborative stuff, I like this idea of creating um, images that, like, for me it was poetry, where it, like, you open up any section and it's a poem, and so the poems take you little by little through it. I'd be really interested, I know you're obsessed with chapter 2. I'd be really interested in how you would depict um, other sections. Have you followed Fishcoin? Do you know who Fishcoin is?
Yeah. Yep. Fishcoin Press.
Yeah, I think it's him. He does a version of the Jonah story that is the only version of it that I saw that carries in an interpretation. So I don't even know if they intended this last part. So you know how it says he makes a booth at the end? Jonah makes a booth and sits in the booth and waiting for it, and then the plant grows up to cover him while he's in the booth.
Yeah.
Okay, so the word for booth is the same word used to describe a feast in the Old Testament called the Feast of Tabernacles.
Hmm.
And you're commanded to be in joy during that time. So if you're in the middle of mourning the loss of a loved one, when Tabernacles hits, you're supposed to stop for the week, like stop for or the week or 8 days, depending on what year it is. Um, Give it a break. Just have a good time. Okay, you have to. It's what the Lord has commanded. Um, and Jonah is read on Yom Kippur, on the Day of Repentance for Jews. So
Okay.
it's at during its most. I actually had a conversation with Jacob about this. At its most, like at the most important moment, in the most important time of the Yom Kippur celebration. Sorry, meeting. It's like you're repenting. You're supposed to afflict yourself. They read Jonah,
Okay.
and the end of repentance is actually tabernacles, which is big party, and you hang out in booths. And
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
so this guy, I think it's Fishcoin, it might be someone else, um, uh, made it look like what those things look like, what Jews make as their booths when they're celebrating the Feast of Booths, um, which to me conveys this image because it's the time where you're commanded to be happy, and he's in his booth just. And it to me like is again one of those like layers where this time of celebration, it's the prodigal son, right? It's the son who won't come inside and won't celebrate. You are
Hmm.
commanded to celebrate, and he's like, no. I am very upset and you can't make me happy. um, I think I'm still very much, I appreciate you liking my artwork, but there's a lot of basics that I really don't understand. And so I want to pressure you to continue going through stuff because I think there could be interpretations and thoughts that people have not considered. Um, that I think we can build something where the images are not merely one-off pieces, but are having conversations with each other and making something bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I think I'm probably compelled to stick with Jonah at least for a while. And that thing about the booth, and see, you have so much background context that I don't really have, or that I would have to dig really hard for. So just adding those layers is really helpful because it just builds up this whole other thing. Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's just getting fresh. You need fresh perspective for any ongoing conversation, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that has a lot to do with it. And
Well, I don't know if you did it intentionally, but it's a different. This new image is Jonah as pious. The first image is Jonah fallen. The second image, and he's not in the whale, and he isn't praying,
yeah.
right? And the second image is one of prayer. Like I said, connecting the image of Gethsemane and all this other stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which again, because it still conveys the snake and all this other stuff, it connects it with this other stuff, with Genesis, and I do see it like being able to connect all these ideas. So I do think it's not the same image from a mildly different perspective. It is a different stage in the chapter.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's been 6 years or something for me, for the first one to this one. And probably some of that has to do with my own changes that I think it's showing something more like a mode of being. I use the word experiential a lot.
Yeah.
But a different experience of the story and the meaning that you're getting out of it. Where it's similar. There's some similarities. There's some things that are sticking around and some things that are kind of different. But there's the end of Jonah's prayer. He says something like, I don't know, does he say repent, but I will turn back towards your holy temple. I will turn around, right? I will repent. So, and at that point, I imagine somebody praying instead of just falling away or running away or however you look at it. So it's a different point of the whole ordeal, I think.
Yeah. No, it's definitely in there. I felt for myself in like what I was doing with the poetry, like I have a poem that's Naomi's Lament, and it's just her sad, and there's no hope in it at all. And I felt I was able to do it. Like as a Christian, I do find, that pressure to always have a happy ending.
Yeah.
But because I'm like, no, I'm basing it on this section of scripture, the happy part will happen when we get to the happy part.
Yeah.
But we're not at the happy part. And I like even looking at other poems that were based on Ruth, I couldn't find anyone willing to just be one emotion. They needed it to be complete.
Right.
And so I like the idea of capturing the different images in a story and being okay with as far as it goes. This story is just here and we're just conveying this image, right? Like
hadn't thought of it that way. It's since you bring it up, the hopelessness thing. I erased it last night, but I had attached to the hook, abandon all hope. I think that might have been something over Dante's Inferno.
It's on the door as they enter the Inferno.
All hope, ye who enter here, maybe.
Yeah.
And I was gonna stick that in there, but it kind of looked a little off. It might end up being the title of this piece. But it doesn't. I was like, I kind of give up on pleasing everybody with like it has to have a happy ending.
Right.
You know, that's just not how it's going to be right now. But, you know, that doesn't mean there's no happy endings. It's just, you know, you have to fully dive into something to really get into it, I think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's an unwillingness to engage in like the Psalms of Lament or the sections of script. Like even a lot of the conversations I've had with people about deconstructing, it's like part of it is because you're Jungian, unwilling to incorporate the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like you weren't told that there's entire books dedicated to doubt. So you think that doubt has no place, because skepticism is actually really, really useful in getting at the truth.
Yeah.
If it's not incorporated, skepticism is a grade 7 boy. That's you know what I mean? Just crapping on everything.
Yeah.
Just like, yes, but what do you build? And I really, I mean, I don't know how you feel, but some of the new atheist movement to me is grade 7 boy, right? Like yeah. And it could be incorporated, but people are scared of incorporating. We keep that at a distance. We're not, that has no part, as
Right.
opposed to, well, what if that has a central role and its role is actually to be more secure in what we think, not less,
Right.
And so we can't be sad. No songs that are just sad. We got to get to the happy part as quickly as possible. Well, and this is part of it too. Job doesn't give an answer. God shows up and gives no answer.
Mm.
He basically just shows how complex the world is. And so the response is basically like Job realizes he doesn't understand. It's not like, oh, okay, I get this. You know what I mean? Like it's actually, my time in Ruth has actually gotten this to me as well, is that God is purposely absent. And same thing in Esther, is that you as the reader have to know that God is working everything together, but it's intentional that God does not appear as a character. Because that's how your life works.
Mm-hmm.
God does not appear as a character the way he does in the story of Abraham. He appears as a character like he does in Ruth, where you have a whole bunch of assumptions and you're wrong, and
Right.
he's in the background guiding everything together through what you might call chance. But no one would do that because they want it to be more explicit. Like Esther has so much restraint that it's willing to actually never mention God. Like, you know that it's God, but the story purposely doesn't say it. Sorry, this is like a little, when it's translated from Hebrew to Greek, the Hebrew just says who salvation will come from somewhere. And perhaps God has put you in this place for such a time, that passage that everyone knows. In the Septuagint, they're like, it's God. God is the one, that's where it's coming from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. But in the Hebrew, it's actually willing to leave the ambiguity of like from somewhere. Like to me, there's a kind of a depth there that is just like, do it. Make something tragic. I had a conversation with a pastor recently, and he was really disturbed by a section of the Old Testament, and I just love those sections so much, but I read them as epic tragedies. Judges as an epic tragedy is a beautiful piece of art, as an inspirational thing for us to try to become, it's terrible. It's just the worst. Right? Like,
Yeah. So what is it, uncomfortableness with uncertainty or with doubt or with skepticism then that checks people on that a little bit? Is it
Yeah.
yeah. I think
An unwillingness to incorporate the shadow, like an unwillingness to incorporate, like it's, to me, it's the same thing as making Jonah be swallowed by a whale.
mhm.
Make it something you understand. Make it something you're comfortable with and you can put into words. And don't make it like in some of the early depictions, he's ripped apart by the creature.
Wow.
Like
Yeah.
if you look at the early, like the image that I was saying, that's Christians drew this, it's this thing that couldn't swallow him whole. Like always in our images, it's a creature that doesn't have to chew
Right.
in order to swallow him, because he's not really dead. He just, but in this image, it's like, oh, he's gone. He's Yeah.
Dismemberment is a pretty classic image in rebirth, the image of being reborn. Um, I think maybe there's the like with this it sounds really bad if I say abandon all the hope, right?
Right.
But if you think of it like Jonah hoped not to have to take on his task, right?
Right.
Jonah hoped to go away. Jonah hoped not to have to. So it's like abandon all hope is like abandoning all of your hopes and your will and your
Mm.
which are very small, right?
Well, it's interesting because I do think that's part of the story. It's
Mm.
like there's different. So when we were with my Bible study going through the Noah story, we did 1 week just on judgment, and then we did a week on mercy, on the mercy in the story. And so there were aspects of it. So we had 1 week that was just a sad week, and we're not going to shoehorn in um, how you're a beautiful, wonderful, right? Like we're gonna take a week and really just take in the chaos of of everything that is flooding in that is our fault, right? Like, and we did a whole week on that, instead of trying to be like, okay, here these different aspects. So that idea of um, the losing hope and everything else, that you get to something where there is hope. It's like the passages that are, people think it's a contradiction. Perfect love drives out fear. But the first encounter with God is awe. It's fear. It's terror, right? Like, um, what's the line in Amazing Grace? Grace that taught my heart to fear, and by grace those fears relieved. So it's like it's the first encounter of grace is terror, and then you go deeper. You got to go. Yeah, it is the shadow. It's yeah.
Right, if you allow yourself to be swallowed, right, it kind of
Yeah.
have to. Um,
Yeah, so maybe there's something in this of what the movement, whatever you want to call it, this little corner, um, uh, the move of maturity m- may not be talking about the shadow, but actually incorporating it. To see a piece that actually incorporates it, which is what I think your picture is doing, because it's not, it's it is past the conversations that other people are having. Like it's past skepticism. It's you know what I mean? Like I'm not even thinking about your postmodern like we're just doing this legitimately and not trying to be um it's not a 1950s version, because like I know Paul has been talking a little bit about this recently. The idea of like if you restart everything from the 1950s, you get to now, like we still get what we believe now in 70 years. Like the conserv like
oh,
the
what does that mean? Can you say more about that?
Okay, so I might be completely rephrasing and
No,
therefore
that's
not
okay.
talking.
I just haven't
Yeah,
heard that, so I'm not sure what that means yet.
yeah. So maybe Paul isn't really talking about it. I'm just getting some of it. If like the conservative movement and all this other stuff, if you go back to the 1950s, you get now. And so people seeing the problems of now and thinking we could solve it by rewinding.
Oh yeah, sure.
If you start the movie if you just rewind the VHS and start from the beginning, you just
Right.
get to now. So
Right.
how do we get to something?
Well, it's like trying to rewind your life. You don't get to go back to like the innocence of your childhood or something. Like that's
Right.
just not, that's not how things just don't work that way. Like
Yeah.
like, things did happen. Now you're here. Now you go forward, right? You don't go
Yeah.
backward. There's no backwardness in
Yeah.
anything. It's always a going forward. I mean, maybe you can like complete the circle or something like that, but usually like a
Yeah.
completing the circle is well, hopefully an upgrade rather than a
Right.
down
Right. Right.
a spiral, I guess. But
Yeah. Well, in your image, I kind of said before this idea of a timeless image. And I kind of said, oh, like um, trying to be someone that fits in 500 years ago or whatever, 1,000 years ago. But when I look at that image, it is clearly not an image from 1,000 years ago, but fits in with that. So
hmm,
again trying to be timeless versus trying to be responding to the last movement.
I
Like,
think if you're being, I don't know if I can say this the right way. If something is genuine, if it's a genuine human experience, then
mhm,
it might touch on the timeless because that's what is timeless. And there's, I don't know what is all this commentary. It's just but um anything genuine, I think, is
yeah,
going to, or at least attempting to be genuine, it is probably going to hit on something like that, maybe.
yeah. I mean, we use the term transcending, right? Like, it's a tra- it's a transcending thing where
Mhm.
it gets. I think that's one of the reasons why we hate phones in art. Like we can't. Bo Burnham was talking about this. Why is someone writing a letter uh, under candlelight cinematic, but someone texting on a phone is not? It's the same. It's the same thing. Light
Oh,
source.
but it's not the same thing, and we
No,
know it's not
exactly.
the same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly, exactly. Um, I can't write a poem that uses the word computer. I can't do it.
yeah.
Right? So what is
Right.
that? It
Same stuff
feels like
in
it's
terms of
not
the human soul. It's just not there, and it's not embodied, and it's like, why is cooking over a fire so much better than cooking on, the stove or whatever?
yeah, yeah, an element. Yeah,
Microwave.
yeah, yeah.
It's just not the same, and you can't rationally say why, but not everything is rational. It's
Right,
uh it's about a deeply human experience,
right.
and that's why, the things that last are always those things, right? It's something that hits everybody in the same spot, or because
Yeah,
we all have those places within us. We all have the human soul, like that's where it
right.
hits you. That's why something sticks, I think.
Well, and
Some don't stick.
it's interesting too because in those conversations about transcendence, with this Bible study that's with a whole bunch of non-Christians, I actually said I'm not going to put any requirement on belief. We're just going to read these stories and take them seriously. And if you take them seriously, it's so interesting because a lot of that skeptical attitude that I was talking about before, it's really just dismissive. Like I don't want to even experience this as a piece of art.
Hmm.
Um, because part of that transcendence is to me when your Jonah pieces is immediately felt. And it's not like, yeah, so that feeling is part of what transcends it. That you reliably, I hate the idea of art being entirely interpretive because I like this idea of the feeling I got from your piece was identical was to the feeling my friend got. He saw it and immediately was hit by the exact same feelings. So in that way, it I mean, you're saying it's not words, but it is a language. It is communicating. It is putting something forward that you wake up and you know it has meaning, even if you don't get all the pieces. You know, you don't necessarily see that it's hell, but it's there and you feel it. You don't feel that it's a personification of water through chaos and connection to the Leviathan. And this is clearly has references to Revelation because of blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't care. I even hear that in your explanation. You spent so much time studying it, you can't even remember where it's from or if it is. It's all in there, right? Like, and so.
I remember how I felt when I was making it.
Right,
I
right.
think that it's funny when you're an artist and you try really hard sometimes to make things. You're like, I want to do this or I want to do that, and what ends up being something that hits people is something you didn't expect at all, but was something that was like when I was making that, it was a very genuine emotional experience that I was going through, and I think that's the only reason I can't do that on purpose. It's just a happening, right? And that seems to be what communicates to other people, because they know what it's about without me having to explain it, because it's a real happening, not a like my small will trying to express something very particular with very clever. That just doesn't work. That never works. There's a just a surrendering to what is actually going on to make something, to show something, an expression of something genuine, I guess. And then it's very gratifying to hear that other people click with it, but it's also kind of you go, like we all know what that is without.
Yeah. How large is your piece, your original Jonah piece, supposed to be?
That's a good question. I don't have it with me physically right now, but it is roughly the size of this one, which is, what is it, like 12 by 20? It's some very odd dimension because I have trouble printing it and framing it and things like that. Something like that. So like 12 by 20. I wish I could have done it huge.
Well, that's one of the things that I've wondered about, is like, it feels like it should be a wall. I've seen, I'm Maltese. I think I mentioned that before. In Malta, there's a church there's a wall in a church that is a Caravaggio painting of the death of John the Baptist. And it's a full scene, and it's a massive wall in a church. And you walk and you're just like staring at it. And it's a completely different experience than, something like the layers in my piece. The layers somehow make it something else. And I would love to see your original piece like a wall.
Yeah, if someone would let me, I would totally put that somewhere. I don't know who would let me, but the scale of things is so much. I've always done things very small because it takes me forever. Very small, really small. Because it's just easier, and I don't have a big studio or anything like that. Like right now, I'm drawing like on the floor.
Right.
But like when you go into like Orthodox churches and the whole wall is painted with scenes of there's Christ, and this whole story around you is so much different. The scale matters. It really does. And it's and when you look up in the dome and there's the image of like I think it's usually I've seen different ones now, but like, is it the Theotokos on top, or is it God the Father with Christ? Maybe just Christ. I've seen a bunch of different ones, I think, actually now.
Right.
But you look up at it, and because of the shape, and then you see the four evangelists around it, or the cherubim around it, and it's so much different than if you were to look at a little tiny. Yeah, I think it would be so cool. And like your large image that you have behind you, if you could put that on a wall in a church, or I don't know, any place where other people can go and gather and walk by it and look at it and really experience it, it's going to be so much cooler than looking at your little picture.
Right. And things that convey awe, and the size is one of the things that conveys awe, right?
Yeah.
I've wondered as well. I don't know why I had this in mind. Of like, I want a Christian at some point to create the Revelation as a, like me and a friend talked about it, as a silent movie, or not a silent movie, but with no narration, no explanation, just to see the images as opposed to trying to explain and make it all logical, to see the things as they're hitting you, to actually be able to experience what, like right now with the Bible study, we're going through Mark, and I'm trying to go through larger chunks where it's impossible for people to understand everything, but I think you would actually get an experience of Mark more similar to what people experienced it throughout time. Of like, not here's 5 verses or whatever, and we're just going to talk about this, but like, sometimes it's waves. it's waves that kind of are over you, and it's only through it going over and over and over again that you start understanding it.
Right, like Revelation with its dreamlike, quality. When you're in a dream, no one's explaining. You're just there.
Yeah.
And it pours over you. Yeah, that's a cool idea.
Terrifying.
Yeah, terrifying.
Terrifying.
Yeah, I don't know if I would actually go see it, but the idea is cool because I'd be too scared.
Yeah.
But the idea is awesome.
Yeah. No, it would be. Yeah, it wouldn't be a family friendly.
No.
No. Yeah. Okay, I think that's most of what I wanted to talk about the Jonah stuff, and then again wanted to share some of my art with someone else, because I am at the stage where I don't know what I'm doing with it. What does one do? How does one solve this problem?
I don't know, but I hope you keep doing it, because it's just like, and you're hitting on these the most archetypal, the most I don't know, moving to me. Well, I've done all these images too, so to me, of course, I'm like, these are the most important ones.
You know what I really like, Dave? When you did that image of Jonah, that was great.
That was the best one. Yeah. No, they're just, to me, they're exciting to me because I think they're, well, I don't know, they're so archetypal. You can,
right.
I don't know, it's gonna hit everybody, and they're the big ones. So, I'm really excited. I hope you share somewhere. I don't know where are you gonna share, but have to share that big one. It's like, how long do you think it'll take you? Any idea?
So I'm in a play right now, so it's I'm not being able to dedicate as much time. The Jonah one, my wife was in a play, and I showed up every single day that she had rehearsal and was making this piece in the back. So the rehearsal period was like 2.5 months. So I was working on it on a regular basis and got it done in 2 months, basically. But this is a larger picture, but the inner bits are the bits with the most detail. As I get outward, it'll become easier. Like the outside is literally just gold and black. That's all it's going to be. Light is going to be gold. That's all it's going to be.
Project.
What?
It'll be a great winter project. You have
like
plenty to do now all winter.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know how long it's going to be. It's all based on the time. But I don't think it, like all of these pieces that I've created that I've shown you have been since March. Like everything has been since March, I'd say. Yeah. So
quick then.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm being rather productive with it. Yeah. And I mean, I'm having like an infinite number of ideas. And honestly, I'd like to, if you would be interested, I'd like to give you some of the ideas, even just to see what you would do for a layout for some of them. Because I'm obsessed with the Book of Judges, and I don't know what to do with it. No one is interested. It's a very bizarre piece. Yeah, it's like, why? Why is that? Yeah. Um,
Well, I'm really glad that you shared those with me. That's super cool, and
yeah.
that we get to talk in depth about Jonah. I haven't actually gotten to do that yet, so that's also really nice to be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It might be good to have follow-up conversations on different ideas. Um, I mean, it feels weird, but like I feel like the real place where those conversations of the archetypes and the images where they ought to go is into art that then people can see it and go, wait a second. Like, what was it? My friend, when he saw my image of the creation of Eve, which is like, it's very, very clearly based on Orthodox images of Eve being pulled out. My friend looked at it and said, wait, Adam has a wound in his side and his bride comes out of there?
Yeah.
What? And I was just like, yes, yes, that is
Right,
correct.
but you have to be able to see it, right? You're not gonna
Right,
maybe pick up on that if you're just reading the book.
right. And him laying almost like lifelessly. It's just like, wait, what? This is happening? And right, like he could all of a sudden see all the images. Like, yep, that is the intention. Like,
Hmm.
and I'd like to see that um where David and Goliath can like I don't know, just in a nutshell. The word Nachash, which means serpent in Hebrew, also you could understand that cheetah might mean spotted, right, in a language. So you
Okay.
could you could describe something as spotted, right? Like you can describe something with Nachash, and that would be shining or could be um, metallic, like specifically like bronze.
Okay.
So you could describe something as being bronze, as being you could use Nahash as a word that would describe something not as being a snake, but as being bronze. So Goliath, when he's shouting about how um, David says, "Who will take away our shame?" He describes what Goliath is doing as shaming Israel, like in Genesis 3. And it just like the shame that Adam and Eve feel. And it describes Goliath as having all of his items there described as being bronze, which
Hmm.
is snake. And it describes how he is wearing scaled armor. It's not mail, it's scales. If you look it up, it's sometimes used to describe fish. So
Hmm.
he is wearing snake armor and it's scaled. And David goes and crushes his head,
Wow.
right? Like it's just like, huh, that's interesting. And sorry, Saul, just to make it even more explicit, when Saul becomes king before, when Saul immediately does something good, the chapter about Saul doing something good is Saul finds out that there's a guy named Nahash. So his name is Snake. There's a man named Snake who says to a bunch of people, you will submit to me, and to show your submission to me, I will gouge out one of your eyes.
Hmm.
So Snake, the eyes, right? Like the opening of the eyes, the not having vision.
Hmm.
Uh, he will gouge out an eye, and the question is, who will take away the shame of this event? And it's Saul comes and defeats the snake.
Hmm.
First Saul defeats the snake, and then David defeats the snake.
Right.
Um, even there's another bit. It's cool. I think, and again, it just seems symbolic of me. He puts on the armor of Saul, but then he says, like David puts on Saul's armor and says, "I can't do this. I haven't tested them." So he takes it off, and so to me, it's the garments. He's wearing protective garments, and he removes them
Yeah.
to face the snake. So it's again a removing of the the garments that are in reaction to the snake.
Right,
That
right.
the shame that puts on the layers. David is the one that takes off the layers and encounters the one that's glistening like a snake and crushes his head.
There's so many. I love how many. So, okay, that also links up. We could go on and on. I'm sure we'll have to
Right,
stop
right,
quickly, but there's that links up with that image I mentioned of the hook being the cross being the hook that catches the Leviathan, but then the string is the different patriarchs.
right, right,
And David, David being, there this being this repetition of this same pattern, just
right, right.
yeah.
Well,
I don't
and
know if I say that better, but you know what I mean, this
no,
repetition
no.
pattern on different levels, like repeating over and over again.
Well, part of it for me is seeing um, Cain is described in the New Testament as being of the evil one.
Mm.
And so that term, Peterson would sometimes make mention of it, that sin is at the door like a ravenous lion,
Mm.
and its desire is for you. The word desire means it either wants to eat you or copulate with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a word used for lust. So it might be, and everyone always depicts sin as at the door wanting to eat Cain as a predator, but I think it's at the door wanting to mate with him. And that
To
he
have possession of him in this
that's
union.
that's right. That
Yeah.
Abel is the descendant of the woman. And Cain is the descendant of the serpent.
Mm.
The enmity between your offspring and her offspring,
Mm-hmm.
that he is the snake. And so this image of like the villain is literally, and I mean, he's almost certainly a Nephilim who is literally the offspring of the serpent, right? So it is again the serpent and the woman
Mm-hmm.
in their battle. Um, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, okay.
Okay, one more thing. Oh no, wait, I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
gonna.
yeah. Okay, no, do your one more thing and I won't riff on it. How about that? Because I
Okay,
wanted to talk to you, okay?
because I just had this. I was looking at somebody had asked me about doing an image of Rebecca, which I'm having a terrible time with. I don't know if I can even do it, but she has twins. I think
Yeah,
they're twins.
yeah,
Right, and so there, I had read something about Esau being drawn towards like the pagan altars or something like that. Even in the womb, she would feel him kicking
yeah,
when when they were going by like these these what's the word? Just these other
yeah,
shrines
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
that. And that Jacob was the opposite. I can't remember where he would kick, but there was this, so like one son was pulled towards the sort of earthly, or the, what would be another word for that? The more sinful, and the other son is obviously is more spiritual, and leading the right sort of life or going the right sort of way, something like that. And what was I going to say? It's just funny. It's the same. I mean, I know there's these many iterations of it, but it seems almost exactly as you were just describing, is Cain being this offshoot
Yeah.
of a serpent who again is on the ground, who is lowly, who is eating of the
Well,
dust, something like that.
it's one of the aspects that people forget is that Rebecca picks Jacob because God told him. God told her. God said when she's pregnant, the younger the like she is told from the while she's pregnant that it's the younger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there is something. Um, Rebecca is a very interesting character because this Rebecca has Laban in her. Like there's Laban, who I sometimes call yogurt because that's actually like if you get Libna is yogurt in Arabic. So Laban's name might mean yogurt. So anyway, Laban tries to trick the servant of Abraham. Like the girl Rebecca is trying to go, And they're like, well, maybe we first do this, or maybe we try. And like Laban is, I can't read it without him being a little bit of a trickster already.
Mm-hmm.
Because then Rebecca has trickster in her, and her favorite child has trickster in her.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, and yeah, so that there's some kind of a connection to trickstering coming from that side of the family. It's one of the problems with the in-laws, okay? Is this kind of a thing. She definitely knows it. But with Jacob and Esau, it's really important. So it's little parts where you get to see stuff. Esau's nickname is Adam. He's called Edom, but in
Really? Okay.
he's called Edom. For this reason, he was called Red.
Right. Okay.
And Red in Hebrew is Edom. And the letters, the central letters of Hebrew, are like you can change the vowels around them and get different words. So Aleph, Dalet, Mem, Adam, you change the vowels on it and you get Edom, right?
Okay.
So you could I mean, in certain areas the ground is red, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now bring this into Adam and Eve, okay? Descendant of the serpent, descendant of the woman.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is tempted and gives away his inheritance because of food.
Mm-hmm.
And for this reason, he is called Adam.
Mm.
So then the smooth man, how might a serpent be described? The one who is smooth, he, when his father's eyes are waning, goes and impersonates Adam. How does he impersonate Adam? He covers himself in the skins of an animal and he deceives
That's interesting.
whose eyes are dimmed, and then his eyes are open, and that's how he steals the blessing.
That's that's interesting. Okay, I'd have to think about that a lot more. Okay. Yeah. All right, we'll stop there because otherwise I'll keep going with the red thing and we'll never.
Well, no, and it is important. So, sorry, just to link those stories together because you found them interesting. Mm-hmm. It says that David is young and handsome and ruddy.
Mm. Yeah.
The word ruddy is Edom.
Yeah, red, yeah. Very interesting.
And that's why we know.
Image, I made Cain red and Abel blue.
Yeah.
That's something I keep going with too, the red and the blue and the interplay between the two.
It's a connection to earth. Like literally the word, because Adam means Adamah is earth. Right. Adam is the man, but he's made from Adamah. And even the word blood is dam. So it's the Adam, the dam is blood. Mm-hmm. So in the Quran, Adam is made from blood. It says you made man from drops of blood. So dam, Adam, red, all Edom, all the same word.
Yeah.
Okay, let's schedule another conversation and we'll just talk about that aspect. Because I would love it if we had a conversation about that stuff and then you get rid of all the crap I say and just make an image out of what is worth anything.
Yeah, I love the connection points because you have a lot more context than I do, like vastly. So it's nice to hear all those things.
Well, yeah, I appreciate your willingness to have the conversation. I hope somebody watches this and is interested or encouraged on it. And I think that picture of Jonah is part of whatever the next thing is. Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much for the conversation. It was great. You taking your afternoon off in Bulgaria?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Dan.
Emily. Oh, because I'm going to post it. Do you? I'll include links to your store and your Instagram. I guess. I think
Thank
that's.
you.
What
Yeah, I have just a website and an Instagram. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. That's perfectly
But let
fine.
me tell you, if you really want to understand her work, carve it. that's how you really, if you really want to appreciate it.
Yes, please carve everything and then show it to me because that is awesome. Yeah.
Okay, I'll talk to you later. Thanks.
All right. Bye.